A fleeing servant collapsed at castle gates. The Duke married her without asking her name. Thunder rolls. A lone figure stumbles through the storm, torn dress, blood on her hands, breathless with fear. The heavy gates of a great castle loom. Above her she falls, lifeless in the mud. At dawn, the doors creak open. The Duke himself lifts her in his arms. By candlelight he speaks. She is mine now. No man shall claim her again. A marriage is sealed before she even wakes. But whispers swirl through the halls. Who is she really? A runaway Maydor? Something far more dangerous. Enemies ride in with forged papers, vowing to drag her back into chains. And secrets from her bloodline threaten to bring ruin on them both. Did the Duke marry a nameless servant? Or the one woman who could destroy his name forever? Comment below and tell me where in the world you're joining from. And if this story made you pause for a moment, hit that subscribe button for more thunder cracked across the darkened sky as Eleanor fled through the rain-drenched night, her bare feet sliding in the mud. Her heart pounded with each desperate step away from Fenwick Manor. The cruel words she had overheard through the study door still rang in her ears. The girl will fetch a fine price at Madame Beaumont's establishment, Lord Fenwick had drawled. To his steward, have her ready for transport by morning. Eleanor's whole body trembled at the memory. She clutched her meager belongings closer, wrapped in a torn cloth she had grabbed in her haste. The bundle held little, a worn dress, her mother's silver cross, and the small book of healing herbs that was her most precious possession. Rain pelted her face as she pushed through a thicket, thorns catching at her sodden skirts. Behind her, she imagined she could hear the thunder of hoofbeats, Lord Fenwick's men pursuing her through the storm. Whether real or imagined, the sound drove her onward despite her exhaustion. The wind howled through bare tree branches, and lightning illuminated the countryside in brief, stark flashes. Eleanor stumbled again and again, her feet bleeding from sharp stones and broken twigs. Still, she pressed forward, knowing that to stop meant capture and a fate worse than the lash. For hours she fled through fields and woods, staying away from the roads where she might be spotted. Her lungs burned with each breath, and her legs felt weak as water. But fear gave her strength beyond her own, pushing her ever onward through the relentless storm as false dawn began to lighten the eastern sky. Eleanor crested a small rise and caught sight of something through the sheets of rain, distant lights warm and golden against the gray. She blinked water from her eyes, hardly daring to hope. There, through the gloom, rose the proud towers of Castle Montclair. She had heard of the great castle. Of course, everyone in the region knew of it. But she knew nothing of its duke or household, only that it lay far from Lord Fenwick's lands. Far enough, perhaps, to offer sanctuary. Lightning flashed again, closer now, making Eleanor jump. In that brief illumination, she thought she saw mounted figures on the road behind her. Real or phantom, she could not stay to find out. Gathering the last scraps of her strength, she stumbled down the hillside toward those beckoning lights. The castle grew larger as she approached, its stone walls rising massive and formidable through the pre-dawn gloom. Lanterns flickered at the gates, their warm glow promising shelter from the storm. If only she could reach them. ... Each step was agony now. Eleanor's vision swam, dark spots dancing before her eyes. The gates seemed to waver and blur, moving further away even as she drew closer. Her legs buckled beneath her, but she forced herself forward. Just a few more steps. Just a little further. The first rays of dawn were breaking over the horizon when Eleanor finally reached the castle gates, through eyes heavy with exhaustion. She saw guards in the Duke's livery straightening to attention, saw their startled faces as they caught sight of her bedraggled form. Help! She tried to whisper, but no sound emerged from her parched throat. The world tilted sideways as her legs gave way at last. The last thing she heard was a guard's voice calling out urgently, "Fetch His Grace." There's a girl collapsed at the gates. Then darkness took her, and Eleanor knew no more in the moments that followed. The castle stirred to life as word spread of the mysterious young woman who had appeared like a spirit from the storm. Guards carefully lifted her unconscious form, while others hurried to alert the Duke and summon help. None could know that this dawn would mark not just the end of Eleanor's desperate flight, but the beginning of a story that would change Montclair forever. Dawn's first light touched the castle walls as the guards carried Eleanor's limp form inside, her fate now in the hands of those who dwelt within. The storm that had driven her to this sanctuary began to fade, its fury spent. Leaving behind a morning washed, clean, and new, Lord Allister paced the shadowy confines of his private chambers, sleep eluding him as rain lashed against the leaded windows. The knock that came was expected. His restlessness had him waiting for something, though he knew not what. "Your Grace." The urgent voice of his head guard carried through the thick oak door. "We found someone at the gates." Allister strode to the door, his tall frame casting long shadows in the candlelight. "At this hour, a young woman, my lord, unconscious in the mud." Something in the guard's tone made Alistair's spine straighten. He grabbed his outer coat and followed down the winding stone steps, torch flames dancing on the walls as they descended. The great hall's vast emptiness echoed with their footsteps. Through the open doors, rain gusted in as 4 guards carried a limp form. Alistair's breath caught at the sight. She was little more than a girl, her simple dress torn and muddied, dark hair plastered to her face. Bare feet, scraped and bleeding, told a story of desperate flight. "Bring her in," he commanded, his voice cutting through the storm's howl. "By the fire." "But your Grace." His steward Matthews hurried forward, wringing his hands. "We know nothing of her. A common servant by her dress, she could be a thief, a spy." "Silence," the word cracked like a whip. Alistair moved closer, studying the unconscious girl's face in the torchlight. Despite the mud and terror etched in her features, there was a gentle dignity there. But it was the marks on her wrists and throat that made his jaw clench. Bruises, some old, some fresh. "She's fled something far worse than mere poverty," he said quietly. The sight stirred memories of his late wife's passionate campaigns against the abuse of servants. Margaret had always fought for those who couldn't fight for themselves. Making his decision, Alistair turned to a hovering page. "Fetch Father Michael." "Now the chaplain, your Grace." "At this hour." Did I stutter? The boy scurried away. While they waited, Alistair ordered warm blankets and had the girl settled on a cushioned bench near the great fireplace. The flames cast a soft glow on her face, highlighting its youthful innocence. She couldn't be more than 19 summers. Father Michael arrived in his nightshirt and robes, looking concerned. "Your Grace." "What emergency requires a wedding, Father?" A shocked silence fell over the hall. Matthews sputtered, "My lord, surely." "You jest." "This unconscious stranger, a woman, sought sanctuary at my gates." Alistair cut in, his voice firm. "Whatever drives her to flee through storm and darkness must be grave indeed. She shall have my protection, my name, or I am not worthy of my title." He twisted the signet ring from his finger, the ring that had been his father's and his grandfather's before him. "But your Grace," Father Michael ventured carefully. "To marry without even knowing her name, she shall have my name," Alistair repeated. "That is all that matters. Will you perform the ceremony?" The chaplain hesitated, then nodded slowly. 2. Witnesses are required. Matthews, you shall serve as one. And you, Alistair, pointed to his most trusted guard. You shall be the second. By candlelight, in the hushed great hall, Father Michael spoke the ancient words. The girl never stirred as Alistair spoke his vows, his voice quiet but unwavering. When he slipped his signet ring onto her small finger, it gleamed in the firelight, marking her as the new Duchess of Montclair. "Let it be known," Alistair declared to the stunned witnesses, "that she is under my protection now. Any who would harm her must answer to me." He gazed down at his sleeping bride, wondering what desperate circumstances had brought her to his door. Whatever demons pursued her, they would find the walls of Montclair Castle a formidable barrier indeed. The morning sun streamed through diamond-paned windows, casting warm patterns across Eleanor's face. Her eyes fluttered open, then widened in confusion. Instead of the rough straw mattress she was used to, she lay wrapped in sheets soft as clouds. The bed beneath her was enormous, its 4 posts rising toward an ornately carved canopy. Eleanor sat up with a start, her heart racing. Rich tapestries adorned the walls, and a fire crackled in a marble fireplace bigger than her old sleeping alcove. This was no servant's quarters, was the finest bedchamber she had ever seen. "Where am I?" she whispered, pulling the silken covers closer. Her last memories were of running through the rain, desperate to escape Lord Fenwick's cruel plans. Everything after that was darkness. The chamber door opened, and a stern-faced woman in a black dress entered, keys jingling at her waist. "Ah, you're awake then. I am Mrs. Winters, the housekeeper of Castle Montclair." Castle Montclair. Eleanor's voice trembled. "Please, I meant no presumption coming here. I only sought shelter from, you need not explain yourself, Your Grace." Mrs. Winters cut in, her tone clipped, but not unkind. "You are the Duchess of Montclair now." Eleanor felt the room spin. There must be some mistake. "I am just a servant girl." "I cannot be." "There is no mistake," came a gentle voice. An elderly man in clerical robes entered, smiling kindly. "I am Father Thomas, the castle chaplain. I performed the ceremony myself last night." Ceremony. Eleanor's fingers found an unfamiliar weight on her left hand, a heavy gold signet ring bearing an eagle crest. "His Grace the Duke found you collapsed at our gates," Father Thomas explained. "Upon seeing your distressed condition, he made a sacred vow to protect you. The marriage was properly witnessed and blessed." Eleanor's mind reeled. "But he doesn't even know me, and I was unconscious. Surely that cannot be legal." "I assure you it is quite legal," came a deep voice from the doorway, though perhaps not conventional. Eleanor's breath caught as a tall man entered. He moved with quiet authority, his dark hair touched with silver at the temples. His eyes were kind but carried a shadow of old grief. "I am Alistair, Duke of Montclair," he said, approaching slowly as if trying not to startle her. "And you are?" "Safe here now, my lady. No harm will come to you within these walls." "My lord, I am deeply grateful," Eleanor stammered, "but I cannot accept such charity. I am common-born, a servant. To make me a duchess would bring scandal to your name." "The decision is made," he said firmly but gently. "You sought sanctuary here, and I have given you the strongest protection I can offer, my name and title. None will dare touch you now." Eleanor's eyes filled with tears of gratitude and confusion. "You are too kind, my lord, but I know nothing of being a duchess." "Mrs. Winters will help you learn what you need to know," the Duke assured her. "For now, rest and recover. We will dine together this evening." Throughout the day, servants brought her fresh clothing, helped her bathe, and dressed her hair. Each time she caught her reflection in the mirror, Eleanor barely recognized herself in the fine blue silk gown and carefully arranged curls. As evening approached, her anxiety grew. When a maid led her to the intimate dining room, conversations hushed as she entered. The Duke rose from his chair, and all eyes turned to watch as Eleanor took her place at his right hand. Duchess's rightful seat, Her hand shook as she reached for the golden goblet before her. The weight of the Duke's signet ring reminded her with every movement that this was real. Around the table, she could hear the whispers of the household staff, some curious, some disapproving. "Wine, Your Grace?" asked a footman, holding a crystal. "Decanter." Eleanor nodded, not trusting her voice. As the rich red liquid filled her cup, she felt the Duke's steady gaze upon her. When she dared to meet his eyes, she found no judgment there, only gentle concern and what might have been admiration. Still, as the first course was served, Eleanor could not shake the feeling that she was an imposter in silk and jewels, playing at being a duchess. She belonged in the kitchens below, not seated beside one of the most powerful men in the county. Yet here she sat, a servant turned duchess, trying desperately not to disgrace the incredible chance she had been given. The morning sun cast long shadows across Montclair's courtyard as horses stamped and snorted, their breath visible in the crisp air. Eleanor stood beside the Duke, her borrowed emerald silk gown feeling strange against her skin. The fabric whispered with every nervous movement, so different from the rough cotton she was used to wearing. Lords and ladies from neighboring estates had gathered for the seasonal hunt, their fine carriages forming a line at the castle gates. Eleanor's heart pounded as each noble approached for introductions. She tried to remember everything Master Edwin had hurriedly taught her about proper greetings that morning. "Your Grace," she murmured, dropping into careful curtsies. Some nobles barely acknowledged her, while others stared openly. Behind raised fans and gloved hands, whispers floated like autumn leaves. "A Kichi maid," they say. "Married while unconscious of all things, ... What could the Duke be thinking? Lady Ashworth, a sharp-faced woman in purple silk, looked Eleanor up and down with undisguised disdain. "How ... quaint. Tell me, dear, do you still remember how to black the boots?" One never knows when such skills might prove useful again. Heat flooded Eleanor's cheeks. The Duke's hand tightened on his riding crop, but before he could speak, horns sounded to begin the hunt. Eleanor watched from the courtyard as the party galloped away, their colorful coats bright against the morning mist. Hours later, servants transformed the great hall for the hunt feast. Eleanor sat beside the Duke at the high table, trying to remember which fork to use as platters of venison and game birds appeared. The candlelight caught the gold ring on her finger, a constant reminder of how far she'd come from the servants. Hall, a commotion at the entrance made her blood run cold. "My lords and ladies, pray pardon the interruption." Lord Fenwick's familiar voice carried across the hall. He stood in the doorway, his elegant coat still dusty from riding. "I've come to reclaim what's mine." Eleanor's hands began to shake. Duke rose slowly from his seat, his expression darkening. "Lord Fenwick, you were not invited to this gathering. Indeed not." Fenwick's smile didn't reach his eyes as he pulled a sheaf of papers from his coat. "But I bring proof that your Duchess is my legal property, purchased as a bondservant these 3 years past, with all papers duly signed." The hall fell silent. Eleanor stared at the documents, knowing they must be forged, but unable to prove it. Her mother had been a free-born herbalist, never a bondservant. "These papers," Fenwick continued, "show that she ran away while still under contract. Therefore, your hasty marriage is invalid, as she was not free to wed." The Duke's voice cut like steel. "Get out, Your Grace, get out." The Duke stepped down from the dais. "Before I have you thrown out." Fenwick bowed mockingly, but his eyes held triumph. "As you wish. But this matter isn't settled. The law is clear about runaway bondservants." He placed the papers on a side table and swept out. Whispers erupted around the hall. Eleanor felt the stares of every noble present, their judgment heavy as chains. She kept her spine straight until the feast ended, though each minute felt like an hour. Later, alone in her chamber, Eleanor finally let her tears fall. The fire crackled softly as she huddled in a chair, her fine, borrowed gown crushed around her. What had she done? The Duke had shown her nothing but kindness, offering protection when she was at her most desperate. How she had brought scandal to his door and threatened his reputation among his peers. She twisted his signet ring around her finger, watching firelight catch the engraved crest. Such a small thing, yet it had changed her life in ways she never imagined. The warmth of his protection warred with her despair at causing him trouble. "I'm so sorry," she whispered to the empty room, tears falling faster. "I never meant to bring such shame to your name." She clutched the ring tighter, torn between removing it to flee again and holding on to this unexpected dream of safety and belonging. The fire burned lower as Eleanor wept, her heart heavy with gratitude for the Duke's protection and despair at the price he might pay for his kindness. The morning sun streamed through the castle's tall windows as Eleanor made her way down the winding stone steps to the kitchens. Her silk slippers whispered against the worn steps, so different from her old, worn leather shoes. Though dressed in fine wool, she had tied a simple apron around her waist. "Your Grace." The cook, Mrs. Thimbleton, nearly dropped her wooden spoon when Eleanor entered the warm, fragrant kitchen. "This is no place for pleas," Eleanor said softly, raising her hands. "I cannot bear to sit idle in those grand rooms upstairs. My hands long for honest work." She smiled at the kitchen maids who stood frozen, clutching their vegetables. "Might I help with the chopping?" Mrs. Thimbleton sputtered, but Eleanor had already rolled up her sleeves and taken a knife from the block. With practiced ease, she began dicing onions, her movements quick and sure. The kitchen staff watched in amazement as their new Duchess worked alongside them, her fingers flying over carrots and parsnips. "My mother taught me that a proper dice makes the vegetables cook more evenly," she explained, demonstrating the technique to a young scullery maid. Soon, the initial shock wore off, and the kitchen filled with comfortable chatter. Days passed, and Eleanor became a familiar sight below stairs. She stoked the hearth fires in the morning, kneaded bread alongside the bakers, and shared stories of her own days in service. The servants' initial wariness melted away like frost in spring sunshine. "Tell us another tale of your mother's healing ways." Your Grace, young Tom, a stable boy, would beg when she brought fresh bread to the stables. Eleanor's eyes would brighten as she spoke of the herbs her mother had taught her to gather: chamomile for sleep, yarrow for wounds, mint for settling stomachs. When she learned that Tom's sister had a fever, she gathered herbs from the castle gardens and brewed a soothing tea. Word spread through the village of the new Duchess's kindness. Soon, Eleanor began making regular visits, carrying baskets of bread and medicines to those in need. She sat with old Widow Chapman, listening to tales of years past while brewing willow bark tea for her aching joints. She taught young mothers which plants could ease their children's coughs and bound up the wounded hand of the miller's son with gentle efficiency. Through it all, Lord Allister watched from afar. He observed her easy way with the servants. How she remembered every name and face. He noticed how she slipped excess food to the hungry children who gathered at the kitchen door. From his study window, he saw her in the gardens, gathering healing herbs in her apron, her face serene in the afternoon light. One evening, as darkness settled over the castle like a velvet cloak, Allister found himself drawn to the chapel by the sound of singing. The stone walls echoed with a clear, sweet voice raised in an old hymn his mother had once sung. He paused in the doorway, watching Eleanor in the flickering candlelight. She knelt before the altar, her dark hair falling loose about her shoulders, her voice carrying the ancient words with simple grace. The familiar tune stirred something in his heart, and without conscious thought, he joined in. Eleanor startled slightly, but didn't turn. Their voices blended in the shadowed chapel, his deep baritone with her crystal soprano rising to the vaulted ceiling like incense. As the final notes faded, she slowly looked over her shoulder. Their eyes met in the gentle light of the altar candles. Something passed between them, something deeper than words, warmer than gratitude, more tender than duty. For a long moment, neither moved, held by the spell of shared song and unspoken understanding. The silence that followed was full of possibility, like the hush before dawn. In that moment, she was not the servant turned duchess, and he was not the stern lord who had married her for protection. They were simply two souls finding unexpected harmony in the gathering dusk. The great hall of Montclair Castle blazed with hundreds of candles as nobles gathered for the winter festivities. Eleanor stood near a marble column, her fingers nervously twisting the ivory fan she had been given just that morning. The silk of her new green gown whispered against the stone as she shifted her weight, trying to remember all the lessons in deportment she had received. "Observe, ladies," came a cutting voice, "how our rustic duchess holds her fan." Lady Pembroke's lips curved in a cruel smile as she addressed her circle of richly dressed friends. One might think she had never seen one before this very day. Titters of laughter rippled through the group. Eleanor's cheeks burned, but she lifted her chin and met their gazes steadily. "Indeed, my lady, I had not. But I find it a clever tool, though perhaps not as clever as a good herb poultice for healing wounds both of flesh and pride." The laughter died. Lady Pembroke's face darkened with anger at being matched by one she considered far beneath her. "How dare you speak to me thus? You forget your place, which was in the scullery, was it not?" "I forget nothing, my lady," Eleanor replied quietly. "Neither my past nor the dignity that should accompany your noble station." She closed her fan with a decisive snap, just as Lord Alistair's commanding voice cut through the tension. "I trust. Lady Pembroke, you are not questioning my choice of duchess." He stood tall beside Eleanor, his presence both protective and challenging. "For I find her dignity far exceeds that shown by some who were born to it." A hush fell over the nearby guests. Lady Pembroke curtsied stiffly. "Of course not, Your Grace. I merely sought to offer guidance." "Then pray direct your generous instruction elsewhere." His tone left no room for argument. The group dispersed quickly, leaving whispers in their wake. Later that evening, Eleanor sat alone in the Duchess's private sitting room, watching the fire dance in the hearth. The warmth helped ease the chill that had settled in her heart during the gathering, but could not fully banish it. The door opened, and Lord Alistair entered, his formal jacket removed, looking more the man than the Duke. "I must apologize," he said, settling into the chair opposite her. "I had hoped to shield you from such cruelty." "You cannot shield me from what I am," Eleanor responded softly. "Or rather, what I was." "What you are," he corrected, "is the finest woman I have ever known." He leaned forward, firelight catching the silver at his temples. "I married you in haste that night, acting on impulse and honor. It was rash, perhaps even foolish." He paused, his eyes finding hers. "But now, after these weeks of watching you, your kindness to the servants, your gentle wisdom with the villagers, your quiet strength today, I cannot imagine Montclair without you. Cannot imagine my life without you." Eleanor's heart beat faster at his words. "My Lord Alistair," he interrupted. "Please, Alistair," she whispered, the name feeling like a caress. "I must confess something as well. I have grown too." As she gathered her courage to love this place, these people, and you, most of all, you. He rose from his chair and knelt before her, taking her hands in his. "When you arrived at my gate that night, I thought to save you. Instead, you have saved me from my loneliness, my grief." His fingers brushed her cheek. "My Eleanor." She leaned forward as he drew closer, their breaths mingling in the warm air. When his lips met hers, it was gentle as a snowflake's touch, then deepening like spring thaw. The firelight wrapped around them like a golden blanket as they shared their first true kiss. Outside in the darkness, beyond the warm glow of the windows, a figure moved away from where he had been watching. The stable hand mounted his horse quietly, a smile of satisfaction on his face. Lord Fenwick would pay well to hear how his former servant had bewitched the Duke of Montclair. The horse's hooves made little sound on the snow-covered ground as he rode off into the night, carrying news that would soon shatter the peace of Montclair Castle. A week passed like a gentle dream at Montclair Castle, filled with shared glances and tender moments between the Duke and his new Duchess. But on a cold morning, as frost painted the window panes with delicate patterns, the peace shattered. The great hall buzzed with tension as the council gathered. Noble lords and ladies settled into their chairs, their faces stern beneath the flickering light of wall-mounted torches. Lord Fenwick swept in, his dark cloak billowing behind him, followed by a weather-worn man in patched clothing. "Your Grace," Fenwick announced with a slight bow to Duke Alistair, his voice dripping with false courtesy. "I present Master Hobbs, a traveling peddler who brings most interesting news about your dear wife's heritage." Eleanor, seated beside Alistair in her chair of state, felt her heart freeze. The peddler stepped forward, twisting his worn cap in his hands. "Begging your pardon, Your Grace," the man said, his eyes darting between the floor and Eleanor's face. "But I knew the girl's mother well. I did. Sarah was her name, and she weren't no honest woman. Lived with a known thief. She did. Never married." "Proper." Gasps and whispers rippled through the assembled nobility. Eleanor's fingers clutched the arms of her chair until her knuckles turned white. "She's not but a thief's byblow," Lord Fenwick declared, his voice carrying to every corner of the hall. "No true blood, no right to the title of Duchess. The marriage must be declared void for the honor of Montclair." Duke Alistair surged to his feet, his face thunderous. "You dare come into my home with such filth?" His voice boomed off the stone walls. "This is nothing but slander, a desperate attempt to discredit my wife. The peddler will swear to it before any court," Fenwick replied smoothly, "as will others I have found who knew the woman." What will the other noble houses say when they learn the great Duke of Montclair married a bastard born of thieves? The whispers grew louder. Eleanor saw the concerned faces of the council members, the barely concealed smirks of those who had always thought her beneath them. Shame and despair washed over her like a cold wave. "Get out!" Alistair roared, pointing at the door. "Get out, before I have you thrown out." But the damage was done. As the council dispersed, Eleanor heard the murmurs, saw the sideways glances. The scandal would spread like wildfire through the countryside, tarnishing not just her name, but Alistair's as well. That night, in her chamber, Eleanor paced by candlelight. Tears fell as she thought of the Duke's rage on her behalf, his unwavering defense. He deserved better than the shame she had brought to his house. The scandal would follow him, diminish his standing among his peers, all because of her. With trembling hands, she sat at her writing desk and pulled out a sheet of paper. The candle flame wavered as she dipped her quill and began to write. "My dearest Alistair, forgive me for addressing you so intimately one last time. You saved me when I was lost, defended me when I was weak, and showed me what true love could be. It is because of that love that I cannot stay and watch your name be dragged down with mine. You deserve a wife worthy of your title, your honor, and your heart. I will carry the memory of your kindness with me, always. With all my love, Eleanor." She sealed the letter with a drop of wax and placed it on her pillow. Then, changing into her simplest dress, she packed a small bundle of belongings. The castle slept around her as she slipped through the shadowy corridors, her feet silent on the stone floors as the first pale light of dawn touched the eastern sky. Duke Alistair woke to urgent knocking. His steward stood at the door, face grave. "Your Grace, the Duchess's chamber is empty." Alistair rushed to Eleanor's rooms, his heart pounding. The bed was untouched, the chamber cold. On the pillow lay a single letter, the seal unbroken, waiting. Like a final goodbye in the growing light of dawn. Through the misty dawn, Eleanor pulled her worn cloak tighter as she made her way down the muddy path toward the small village of Millbrook. Her fine shoes, the last remnant of her brief life as a duchess, were already ruined by the journey. But she pressed on, knowing she had made the right choice in leaving Castle Montclair behind. The widow, Thatch's cottage, sat on the outskirts of the village, its thatched roof showing signs of wear. When Eleanor knocked on the weathered door, the old woman peered out suspiciously. "Please," Eleanor said softly, "I seek shelter. I can work, tend the sick, and know healing herbs." The widow studied her face for a long moment before opening the door wider. "We've no healer here since old Mary passed. Come in then, but mind you, earn your keep." Within days, word spread through the village of the gentle-handed healer staying with Widow Thatch. Eleanor threw herself into the work, finding comfort in the familiar routines of grinding herbs and brewing healing teas. When little Tom, the miller's son, came down with fever, she sat up 3 nights straight, bathing his brow with cool cloths and feeding him strengthening broths until the fever broke. "Bless you, lady," his mother had whispered, noting Eleanor's fine speech and gentle manners. Soon the villagers were calling her the Lady Healer, though none pressed her about her past. The days stretched into weeks. Eleanor rose before dawn to gather herbs, help the widow with her washing, and tended to any who came seeking aid. Her hands grew rough again from work, but she welcomed the distraction. It was only in the depths of night, lying on her thin pallet by the hearth, that she allowed herself to remember. She would touch her lips, remembering that single kiss she had shared with Alistair in the firelight. Tears would slip silently down her cheeks as she recalled the warmth in his eyes when he spoke of being unable to imagine life without her. But then the bitter memory of Lord Fenwick's accusations would surface, the cruel words about her mother, the threat of scandal that could ruin the Duke's standing. No, she had done the right thing in leaving. Better a clean break than watching Alistair's reputation crumble because of her common blood. The villagers brought what they could in payment: fresh eggs, dried meat, sometimes a few copper coins. Eleanor accepted only what she needed to help supply her healing work. She learned their names, their troubles, their small joys. Young Mary's twisted ankle, old Thomas's cough, the baker's wife's headaches, she treated them all with the same gentle care. "You've a gift," Widow Thatch told her one evening as they sat mending by candlelight. "Remind me of old Mary." "You do?" "Same way with the herbs, same tender touch." Eleanor managed a small smile, though her heart ached. Here, at least, she could be useful without bringing shame to those she loved. But peace was not to last. One stormy evening, as Eleanor stirred a pot of healing broth, urgent pounding rattled the cottage door. 2 village men supported between them the hunched figure of an elderly monk, his brown robes soaked through with rain and mud. "He collapsed on the road," one man explained as they helped the monk to a chair. "Asked for the lady healer." Eleanor hurried to remove the monk's sodden outer robe and wrap him in a blanket. His face was pale with exhaustion, breath labored. As she pressed a cup of warm broth into his trembling hands, his rheumy eyes fixed on her face. "Thank heaven," he wheezed. "I have found you at last. ... Eleanor." She froze at the sound of her name. The monk reached for her hand with surprising strength. "You must hear what I have to tell you," he gasped. "About your mother ... The old monk's breath wheezed as he lay upon the widow's humble straw mattress. his rheumy eyes fixed on Eleanor with desperate intensity. "My lady," he whispered, his trembling hand reaching for hers, "I have searched for you these many months." Eleanor knelt beside him, pressing a cool cloth to his fevered brow. "Peace, good father. Save your strength." "No time," he gasped. "I served in Lord Fenwick's household 15 years past. I knew your mother, child." His words caused Eleanor to freeze, her heart thundering in her chest. She was no common woman, no thief's mistress, as they claim. Tears welled in Eleanor's eyes as the monk continued, his voice growing urgent. "Your mother was Lady Catherine of House Blackwood, daughter to Baron Blackwood himself. She was cast out, branded a thief when she discovered her father's steward stealing from the treasury." His wrinkled hands fumbled at his robes, drawing forth a sealed parchment. "The steward framed her, and Lord Fenwick helped hide the truth for a price." Eleanor's hands trembled as she took the letter, its wax seal bearing the Blackwood crest. "All these years, .. double quotes," she whispered. "Your mother fled rather than face imprisonment, finding work as a servant. She died protecting this truth, hoping one day justice would prevail." The monk coughed violently, his strength failing. Just then, the cottage door burst open. There stood Alistair, rain-soaked and breathing heavily, his eyes wild with relief and fear as they found Eleanor. "My love," he breathed. "Your Grace." Eleanor stood, the letter clutched to her breast. "How did you? I have searched every village." "Within 20 miles, he said, crossing the room in 3 long strides. "I would have searched 100 more." His strong hands gripped her shoulders as his eyes searched her face. "Why did you leave me?" "I could not bear to bring shame upon your name," Eleanor whispered, tears spilling down her cheeks. "A duchess must be worthy of her title." "You are worthy," Alistair declared fiercely. "Your gentle heart and noble spirit shame those who wear their titles like crowns of thorns." His gaze fell to the letter in her hands. "What is this?" The monk's weak voice drew their attention. "The proof of her lineage, Your Grace. Lady Eleanor is of noble blood, though stolen from her birthright." Alistair took the letter, breaking the seal. His eyes widened as he read. "This changes nothing," he said at last, looking at Eleanor with pure love. "Whether you were born to nobility or poverty, your heart remains the same. That is what I fell in love with, not your name or blood." "My lord," Eleanor breathed, her heart soaring despite herself. The monk smiled weakly, reaching for their joined hands. "Love sees truly what pride obscures," he whispered. "I die content, knowing justice is restored." His rheumy eyes grew distant as he raised a trembling hand in blessing. "May God bless your union." His final breath escaped in a gentle sigh as Alistair gathered Eleanor into his arms. She buried her face in his chest, overwhelmed by grief and joy mingled together. "I swear by all I hold sacred," Alistair murmured into her hair, his arms tightening around her, "I will never lose you again. Whatever storms may come, we weather them together." They held each other in the humble cottage, the monk's peaceful face bearing witness to love's triumph over pride and prejudice. Outside, the rain had ceased, and weak sunlight pierced the clouds, as if heaven itself smiled upon their reunion. The great doors of Castle Montclair swung wide as Lord Alistair and Eleanor returned home. Winter sunshine gleamed on fresh snow as they stepped from their carriage, the sealed letter safely tucked in Alistair's coat. Word of their arrival spread swiftly through the castle and village, and people gathered in the courtyard. Nobles, servants, and villagers alike. Alistair guided Eleanor up the stone steps, where he turned to address the assembled crowd. His voice rang clear in the crisp air. "Good people of Montclair, I present to you your true and lawful duchess." He drew forth the letter, its broken seal visible to all. This document proves what I have known in my heart, that my wife's nobility comes not just from birth, but from her very nature. As he read the letter aloud, gasps and murmurs rippled through the crowd. The truth of Eleanor's heritage, her mother's unjust exile, and Lord Fenix's treachery unfolded before them. Eleanor stood tall beside her husband, though her cheeks flushed pink at being the center of such attention. "Let all who doubted know this," Alistair declared, his voice fierce with pride. "Eleanor is daughter to Lady Catherine of House Blackwood, and more than worthy of her place as Duchess of Montclair, by blood and by heart both." A cheer rose from the servants first, the maids, stable boys, and kitchen staff who had come to love Eleanor's gentle ways. The villagers joined in, remembering her kindness with herbs and healing. Even the nobles present bowed their heads, some graciously, others stiffly, but none dared challenge the proof before them. Mrs. Potts, a cook, pushed through the crowd with tears in her eyes. "Begging your pardon, Your Grace," she said to Eleanor, dropping a clumsy curtsy. "But noble blood or no, you'll always be our dear lady, who never thought herself too good to knead bread beside us." Eleanor clasped the cook's weathered hands in her own, "And I never shall," she promised, her voice carrying clearly. "A true noble serves her people first. I may be a duchess now in name as well as station, but my heart remains as it always was, grateful for every kindness and eager to return it tenfold." Her words brought fresh cheers, and even some of the proudest nobles found themselves touched. By her humility, the steward called for celebration, and servants rushed to prepare the great hall for a feast. As evening fell, hundreds of candles transformed the great hall into a wonderland of golden light. Garlands of winter greenery draped the stone walls, their scent mingling with roasted meats and fresh-baked bread. Nobles and servants alike filled their plates, the usual strict divisions of rank softened by joy and goodwill. When the musicians struck up a lively tune, Alistair led Eleanor to the center of the hall. "My love," he said softly, so only she could. "Here, will you dance with me, not as my bride of necessity, but as my chosen partner in all things?" Eleanor's eyes shone with happy tears as she took his hand. "In all things, my lord, until my last breath." They moved together in perfect harmony, her borrowed gown replaced now with one of deep blue velvet that swirled about her feet. The candlelight caught the sapphires at her throat, Alistair's gift, and made them sparkle like stars. Through the high windows, snow began to fall, soft and thick, blanketing the world in pristine white. But inside, warmth and music reigned. Servants and nobles alike watched their duke and duchess dance, seeing in their joy the triumph of true love over pride and prejudice as they twirled past the great hearth. Eleanor's laugh rang clear as silver. Belle's and Alistair's smile shone brighter than any crown. They had found in each other not just love, but the perfect balance of nobility and humility, of duty and devotion. The snow fell steadily outside, sealing their happiness in peaceful white, while inside, their people celebrated the victory of a love that had conquered all obstacles to bloom in full and glorious flower. Thanks for taking a moment to feel with me. If this story reminded you of what matters, hit subscribe. I'll be here tomorrow, continuing our story.